Ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, or whoever's watching, I feel the need to say this originated on YouTube, so, yeah. I haven't been thinking of an interesting theory. I really hope you can hear me. Many people know the, video game known as Portal. Great game. It brought back a old concept, but still an interesting one. That is, obviously, portals. Creating a sort of warp gate from a certain destination to another. And that got me thinking just a couple minutes ago, I'm not really sure why. The theory of portals. What is the theory of portals? Well, my theory of portals, anyway. Anyway, so I have my notebook and pen that I got the other day. Alright. So think of it this way. This is my explanation, alright? Let's say that this pen doesn't work. I have Sharpie right here. Alright. So we have this, okay? Two x's and y. This represents destination 1, destination 2. This wall represents a wall. Now, think of it like this. Here's my theory on what portals are, or what, like, in depth they are. Creating a portal. Think of well, let me say this first. Think of our world, this three-dimensional space, length, width, and depth, as or on a sheet of paper, a map. Now, the reason why this gets a little interesting is it's a little hard to think of 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional field accurately as a map, so to speak. So here's my theory. Alright, let's say this is, this one's me, where I'm at now, and this other X over here is the other side of this wall, right here, leads to the office. Now, to create a board, what the portal is it takes the map of the world like this, right? And it has to remove the space between D1 and D2. What's the best way to do that on a map? It folds the map over. So we go from this to this. It folds our dimensions, so to speak, to eliminate middle ground, even though the middle ground still exists. Not to the portal. The portal has folded that map of our dimension. Now, this being said, I'm dropping my paper. This being said, think of it, or with doing this, all that's really left necessary is the actual portal, which gets past that lip, smashes through that subspace, so to speak, to allow the simple walk across this. So, now, I might be a little all over the place. It's kind of just coming at me at random. So, if this is how it works, which seems the only logical way that it would work, notice there are creases in the paper. Now, which to paper is near permanent damage, so to speak. So some would say, well, wouldn't that leave the similar permanent damage to the dimension? Not permanent. I believe that time matter itself is such a stubborn element, as I would call it. I believe time is an element, not a physical element, of course. Actually, that's a whole nother theory. It kind of is, to me. Anyway, so it'll correct itself over time and heal back to normal. However, for the time it takes, I believe it may take hours, may take a day, may take seconds. You'll be able to see if you know where to, I guess you could say if you know what you're looking for. In the space between where the portals traveled, there'll be a sort of disruption, the creases, between the two areas. From here to the office, there'll be a sort of disruption in those drawers, that wall. That will soon heal, but it'll just seem kind of off. Of course, our eyes might just see it as normal, as many of us are not. Actually, I'm just going to safely say all of us aren't capable of thinking and recognizing a sort of quantum disruption, so to speak. With that being said, you'll be able to tell when a portal was recently made. Now, however, it comes with one more thing. If you keep, I'm not going to do it now because I'm too lazy right now, but if you keep taking a piece of paper, folding it over and over and over in all these different directions, you cause more damage to the paper. That being said, more portals you put in a selected area will take longer to heal due to the higher dimensional damage that you've done, or that you put. And potentially ripping the paper or the map of our dimension, which doesn't take rocket scientists to tell if it's not exactly good. So we have now another thing is could you cause dimensional damage from bringing too much things through a portal, or too many things through a portal? It's an interesting concept, just because, think of it, the bigger the portal you'll need, the more folding is involved. Meaning, how would I put this? Well, I think actually that puts it up enough. You make a bigger portal, you're going to have to fold this map more times to get the full portal effect. Bringing stuff through it, however, I wouldn't think that it would cause any, so to speak, or not so to speak, per se, damage to the dimensional map. The only real damage is the portal itself, in which case you just have to not do a lot of them, and the matter will correct itself. So, also one more thing to note, looking back at this paper, I just wanted to travel from here to here. So, you would think only this straight line is affected. Incorrect. This entire line is disrupted. this entire gap. So, whenever you make a portal, you're not just causing a disruption directly between point A and point B. You're actually somehow on this three-dimensional map. You have, how do I say this? You have caused a widespread dimension. It could be the same as, let's get a new paper for this one. If I wanted, let's say, actually we're not even going to do that. Actually, I think I might need to. Alright, so let's make markings. We want to travel from here to here. So, of course, because we can't really imagine our world on a simple, or our dimension, I shouldn't say our world, our dimension on such a simple scale as flat, which is where the unpredictable damage comes from. Each different variation of the portal that you will do will create a different sort of damage. Let me give you an example right here. Actually, this worked out fabulously for the example. Alright, so now, went from this, drop to that. But look at all this, or all this area of damage, and also note, they're not parallel. They continue off in a greater distance. So, actually, you'd be able to, if one figured out how to cause this dimensional process, the portal process, one could actually observe its effects and see how our dimension truly is mapped out, in which case we could even use that to base off to find what does the fourth dimension look like. Because obviously to a dimension lower is extremely simpler. Like it was some geometry movie that came up at school. No one even watched it. Teacher didn't care. We weren't watching it. It just was on. But it introduced an interesting concept. I would look at it every so often, like, shiny colors. I'm gonna use a die for this just because of the dots. The different dimensions. We're gonna go to the first dimension. A point. A point can't be really definable as anything else. It is a literal point in time, or in a given area, and that is its entire dimension. Which is interesting because to try to think of an actual point is impossible. It infinitely goes lower and lower, but staying the same. Because it has no length, no width, no depth. You can't even think of it as, let's say, a speck. Because a speck, when you zoom in on it, still has a tiny bit of length and width. This does not. It has nothing. It's a point. It is arguably existable to some, if you truly get into it. Alright, now the second dimension, length and width. Now, in this movie, it was sort of strange because it took place in a sort of dimension that only had length and width. They did not think the third dimension possible. It was just a myth, much like third dimension to the fourth dimension. And what it was is basically they would roam around this area, and there was this phenomenon that would randomly happen of a figure appearing and disappearing spontaneously. It would speak. It was almost like a godlike figure. Later to find out it was something of the third dimension. Because it was of the third dimension, it saw their dimension as flat, a piece of paper, giving them the ability to, let's say, so for example, I'm going to use one of these papers. Like if this was their dimension, he could, like, let's say if it was my hand, to them, he was outside of his dimension, but as soon as he passed through, they didn't see him as a whole, they just saw a circle that was his finger, so to speak, you know what I'm saying? So, he was in their dimension at this point, and that's how he would appear. Appear, he would disappear, appear, he would disappear, appear, he would disappear, and because he saw it all as a map, he could go anywhere. And then, so the second dimension of length and width, you could imagine it as just this plane, and if you were a creature of it, the third dimension would seem like a joke, if the theory was even introduced, because they could not physically imagine something so great as depth to them. Now, we go to third dimension, our dimension. Depth is added. Now, given this, just like in that movie, we have, or subjectively speaking, I'm not sure what would be the proper term, so we're not going to use that term, disregard that. Speaking in a manner of such, we have that ability to enter and exit the other two planes, points, or the first and second dimension, points and planes, and of course access to our own third dimension, where we prosper, where we live. Now, I don't believe we should be so selfish to say that we are the highest dimension on the chain. I fully believe the fourth dimension exists, maybe even a fifth. I'm not sure, but I'm not willing to think that far, because if we haven't gotten to the fourth, we don't need to worry about the fifth yet. The fourth dimension, ladies and gentlemen, is where our map lies. It's where our plane, our map, that we need to fold to make these borders exists. Much like in that movie, the two-dimensional plane that the main person was on, it was almost seen floating in void. But to them it was everything. They couldn't see anything else but their universe. Yet to the outside it was so simple. It was interesting. At the end of that movie, they were saying, it's like, well, what about a fourth dimension? And then the thing that was in the third dimension was like, come on, don't be silly. So no such thing exists. In which they show an interesting shape where it's kind of like a cube inside of a cube, only it's constantly turning and like overfolding itself. I'm not sure the technical term for it. It was pretty cool looking though. And so kind of saying like, it could be there. I believe it is there. Not based on the movie, of course, but through my own deduction. of simply saying, this can't be the end. Of course, not stopping it, it's just saying it can't be the end. Okay, we're done, let's go. But thinking further into it. Also, another thing to note is the fourth dimension has nothing to do with my theory of teleportation. That relies completely on just the third dimension. I'll explain that sometime in probably a later video. But basically, there's no basic in this. What are you talking about? We can't... I'm not sure how I could say this now. We're going to jump back to the beginning. The very beginning. Basics of the portal. Alright? Because until we figure out how to do this, we shouldn't even worry about the fourth dimension. The main thing in this, of course, is 2 steps. And no, I don't mean 1, 2. It's 1 is finding the force to fold our dimension as such. The second is passing through that fold. Because if you're doing this yourself, you'll see there's a bit of a lip there. It's a fall. Because although the map is folded, that remaining matter is still there, which is the fantastic thing about the portal. Unlike teleportation, you're not, per se, putting any matter at risk. You are, instead, or you are, it's interesting, it's skipping over pieces of the map. Because all this matter in between that you're skipping still exists. It's still there. Right there. You're just finding shortcuts. Now in this shortcut, all you're basically doing is whenever this fold right here hits, the second step is finding the force to actually break through that fold. Because if you don't, then you're just going to end up following it right back around and you're going the basic track. You need to find a way to break through that fold, that crease. Using that damage that you've done, you use that weak point, or in the dimension, and have a force to temporarily shatter that barrier, creating the portal to the other side, the destined point. I'm not sure how this can be obtained. Technology, maybe. Mental, maybe. I'm not really sure. Because the theory of this is much different than anything I've ever thought of. And, let's see. You're shattering matter by bending it. That's the basics of it. You're bending subspace. You're manipulating in the fourth dimension to the third dimension and using that to jump matter. That's my theory on portals, everybody. This video is quite long. But I'm fairly sure I posted a tad bit longer. But I'm getting to that record. So, that's my theory on portals. Aperture science. Good work. Taking over the world and all. Ladies and gentlemen, this is masterfrogez, aka the Sinister Beast. I will see you in the next video.